Well, the next public hearing of the bipartisan House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol is set for Monday morning. The committee conducted more than 1,000 interviews. It plans to shed additional light on the planning and execution of the deadly insurrection. The committee's revelations are already proving to be a heavy lift for the victims of that day. Scott McFarland is in our Washington bureau with the latest. Scott, good morning.
Hey, Michelle, good morning. This week's going to feature a series of new hearings from this committee investigating the U.S. Capitol attack. They've collected 140,000 records in addition to those 1,000 interviews. But yes, it's also a challenge for the victims, too.
As the January 6th committee showed 12 minutes of new angles of the horror from that day, and as a hero officer knocked unconscious recounted the attack.
There were officers on the ground. They were bleeding, they were throwing up, they were, they had, I saw friends with blood all over their faces.
Some of the officers and families of the victims wept in the audience. In the front row watching was Sergeant Aquilino Gonell of Virginia. Gonell fought a war in the U.S. military, but he says he never saw brutality like the kind he did January 6th.
They kept saying, "We're not listening to you, police officers. Whatever you say to us don't matter."
He's still not fully back on the job, still nursing injuries from the riot to his foot, shoulder, and hand.
Is it hard to hear these things and see these things played again?
Sometimes certain aspects of it, like when I fear for my life.
Capitol Officer Harry Dunn, who tells me he endured racial epithets amid the mob, says he's sought help for mental health needs in the month since. And for the congressional staff who barricaded themselves behind locked doors, these hearings can be a challenge to watch.
Is it hard as somebody who was hiding in a room for her life to watch all that?
Absolutely. That day was agonizing. It was excruciating.
Did you relive it watching those videos?
It was shameful. And yes, watching those videos brought up those feelings again.
Each month now on Capitol Hill, a group of staffers privately meets. Political staff, police, custodial, and cafeteria workers. They meet to talk about the trauma of the attack on their offices from a mob of hundreds, some of whom were accused of brandishing bats, sticks, pepper spray, carrying Confederate flags, even erecting a gallows. Sharon Eliza Nichols, a political aide from Washington, helped form the group.
Dozens show up? A few people show up?
Dozens showed up to our first meeting. We're expecting dozens to show up again next week because the hearing will bring up
17 months after the siege, and in the final weeks of an unprecedented congressional investigation for the survivors, the grief and the trauma have no sure end date.
Scott, what do we expect at the second hearing on Monday?
Yeah, it's going to happen in the morning, not in prime time. Let's start with that. They're going to focus on the claims of voter fraud. The committee's going to say it has, through its investigation, evidence that the Trump team knew those claims of voter fraud were bogus and that they told the former president that, and that it lit the flame, Michelle and Dana, that led to all the other steps between November 3rd and January 6th.
Scott, when do we think the hearings are going to end, and then how does it finish?
It's going to take about 2 more weeks, but one committee member tells me, Dana, they're going to keep investigating and interviewing after the public hearings are done. We expect a written report maybe late summer, early fall, and then they'll propose legislation to make some fixes or some changes to prevent another recurrence January 6th, 2025.
All right, Scott, thank you.